Welcome to Love Lies Chronicles.
I didn't even want to go to that dinner. It was one of those things she planned weeks in advance, her idea of social maintenance, networking with friends, staying in the loop. I never had much patience for it, sitting at long restaurant tables where everyone shouts over each other, sipping overpriced wine while pretending to care about someone's yoga certification or new side hustle. But she said it mattered to her. Said it would mean a lot if I came. So I went. The place was one of those trendy bistro-style spots downtown, dim lighting and loud laughter bouncing off every surface. We were seated at a long communal table, and I ended up a few seats down from her, wedged between one of her co-workers' husbands and a woman who kept checking her phone between bites of salad. At first, I barely noticed what she was saying. I was half listening to the man beside me complain about his mortgage, nodding politely while my mind drifted to work, to deadlines, to what we do over the weekend. Then someone clinked their glass, drawing attention to my wife at the far end of the table. That's when I started to hear her voice more clearly, sharp, a little louder than usual, with that tone she gets when she's tipsy and trying to be funny. "You know, married life is so overrated," she said with a laugh that was just a bit too eager. "I mean, we're basically just roommates at this point." The table chuckled. I didn't. My fork froze in midair. I turned slightly, angling my ear toward her without making it obvious. She didn't stop there. "I'm serious," she continued, grinning. "We don't do couple things anymore. We split chores, pay bills, argue about who left the lights on. Might as well be living with a Craigslist stranger." More laughter. Not uncomfortable chuckles, genuine amusement. Someone across from her added, "So what you're saying is, you've got free rent with no romantic obligations?" That got an even bigger laugh. And she? She just smiled wider and took a sip of her wine. That's when I felt it. The quiet, sickening twist deep in my gut. It was something heavier, like someone had taken a scalpel and cut clean through a part of me I hadn't realized was exposed. It was the ease with which she said them, the casual cruelty. And the worst part? I don't think she even thought it was cruel. To her, it was banter. Social currency. Something to make the table laugh. I looked down at my plate and tried to collect myself. A few people looked my way, maybe to gauge my reaction, maybe to see if I'd join the joke. I didn't give them the satisfaction. I forced a smile, took a bite of food I couldn't taste, nodded at something the guy beside me said about refinancing. I didn't say a word to her the rest of the evening, not in the car ride home. I lay beside her that night, staring at the ceiling, her breath soft, and even as she drifted off without a care in the world. Meanwhile, her words replayed in my head like a cracked vinyl, over and over and over again. Just my roommate. It was such a throwaway line, but it said everything. Because it wasn't just a joke at dinner. A confirmation of something I hadn't wanted to admit to myself for months. The way she moved around the house lately, like I was furniture. She'd stopped seeing me as her husband. Somewhere along the way, I'd become just another fixture in the house. A presence she tolerated. And now, apparently, I was also her punchline. I couldn't sleep that night. I watched the shadows crawl across the ceiling as the hours passed, wondering when it happened, when she stopped valuing me as a partner. Maybe it wasn't one moment. The next morning, she acted like nothing had happened. She greeted me with a casual morning, poured herself a coffee, and scrolled through her phone. No mention of the dinner, of what she said, of the laughter that still echoed in my ears. I watched her from across the kitchen, this woman I had loved, supported, sacrificed for. I remembered how I used to reach for her hand without thinking, how we used to laugh together about things only we found funny. That was gone. And what hurt most was that she didn't seem to miss it. If I was just her roommate, then what was I doing giving her everything I had? Why was I carrying the weight of this marriage while she made jokes about me in public? I was waking up, and once I was fully awake, things would never be the same again. I didn't say a word about that night. Not the next morning, not that week. There was no confrontation. I simply decided to take her words seriously. If I was just a roommate to her, then I would start behaving like one. It began subtly. I stopped picking up her dry cleaning. She usually left the tags on the counter with a chirpy, "Could you grab this after work?" like it was assumed. I tossed them into the trash without a word. She never asked if I got them. She just went back a few days later and realized they hadn't been picked up. Then came the small conveniences. Every Saturday morning, I used to get up early and make breakfast, eggs, coffee, sometimes pancakes if I had time. It was a ritual I liked, even if she barely said thank you anymore. That Saturday, I didn't move. I stayed in bed until 10, then made myself toast and ate it alone in the backyard. She eventually wandered out in her robe, hair a mess, squinting at me like something felt off. "You didn't make any coffee?" "No," I said, without looking up. "Didn't feel like it." She blinked, visibly thrown off, but didn't comment. Just wandered back inside. I didn't follow her. That weekend, I didn't do the laundry either. It piled up in the hamper, hers and mine both, but I only washed mine. Folded it, put it away, left the rest untouched. She never mentioned it aloud, but I caught her frowning at the overflowing basket a few times. I didn't offer an explanation. I wasn't keeping score or punishing her. I was simply following the logic she had laid out in that restaurant. If we were roommates, I wasn't obligated to care for her like a husband would. I was no longer the person smoothing out her life behind the scenes. I was the guy sharing the lease. And the more I stepped back, the more I realized how much I had been carrying. Grocery shopping? I used to plan every meal, keep a list, make sure her favorite snacks were in stock. Now, I just picked up what I needed. The fridge grew emptier by the week on her side. She started ordering takeout more often, eating in front of the TV. I stopped asking about her day. If she spoke to me, I replied politely, briefly. I was civil, respectful, but I gave her nothing more than what a roommate might: basic courtesies, minimal emotional investment. And she seemed puzzled, just confused. Like a fog had rolled in, and she couldn't quite see what had changed. She began noticing things, at least, I think she did. She'd pause when she walked into the living room and found me reading alone. Once, she even reached out, lightly touching my arm as I passed her in the hallway. "Hey," she said. "Everything okay?" I smiled politely. Of course. That was it. No probing questions, no deeper follow-up. She let it go. And that told me everything. She wasn't worried about me or us. She was worried about the shift in routine. The comfort of being catered to was starting to slip away, and that made her uneasy. There was something deeply revealing in how she responded, not with concern or self-reflection, but with irritation at the change in her daily experience. As though the absence of my effort was more jarring than the presence of her disrespect. I think she still thought she had the upper hand. I started taking late walks in the evenings, not to clear my head, but to think. What would I need to take, to protect, to untangle our finances, our lease, our lives? We didn't have children, and thank God for that. The silence between us would have suffocated them. I reviewed the bills. Most were in my name: utilities, rent, streaming services, phone plans. I started shifting them, notifying providers, transferring responsibility. Bit by bit, I began cutting cords she didn't even realize were connected. Then came my belongings. I started moving them in phases: boxes of keepsakes, old files, my tools from the garage. I rented a small storage unit across town and filled it slowly, carefully. She never noticed. Or if she did, she said nothing. Maybe she thought I was decluttering. One night, while she was out for drinks with her colleagues, I took down the framed wedding photo in our hallway. It had hung there for 6 years. Neither of us had looked at it in ages. I wrapped it in newspaper, set it in a box, and drove it to storage. That was the moment I knew I wasn't just pretending to be a roommate anymore. I had become one. And like any good roommate preparing to move out, I was making sure everything was in order, so when I left, I wouldn't have to look back. I would simply vanish from her script, quietly and completely. The next time she called me a roommate, she'd have to do it in an empty house. And I wondered if she'd laugh then. The tipping point came on a Thursday evening, just when I thought I'd grown numb to it all. She was in the kitchen on her phone, laughing. I was on the couch, pretending to read. In truth, I'd been watching her more carefully these days, to understand what, if anything, still connected us. She didn't notice. Then I heard my name. "Well, of course he's still here," she said into the phone, her back to me. "He's predictable like that. Reliable. He still thinks we're fine, as long as the bills are paid and the trash goes out." The person on the other end must have said something amusing, because she laughed again, more freely this time. I mean, it's not like he asks questions. He's just background noise. A walking paycheck who keeps the fridge stocked. The words didn't cut the way they might have weeks earlier. I didn't flinch. I just let them settle, because now I wasn't looking for signs of remorse or hope. I was collecting data, evidence, proof of who she had become and who I had been reduced to in her world. She walked past me a few minutes later, oblivious to the fact that I'd heard every word. I looked up from my book, offered a neutral expression, and said, "Going out tonight?" "Yeah," she said casually. "Happy hour with Jenna and Laura. Don't wait up." I didn't respond, just nodded and watched her leave. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was a message from someone I never expected to hear from in that context. I need to say something, and you need to hear it. I didn't feel right keeping quiet anymore. It was one of her friends. Jenna. The same Jenna she'd mentioned on the way out. The same Jenna who had laughed at her roommate joke during that dinner. I stared at the screen, uncertain whether to reply. I don't want to get involved. The next message came. But you should know she says worse when you're not around. It's not fair what she's doing. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then I typed. Doing. She talks about you like you're an accessory. Like you're dumb enough to hang around no matter what. She even said she's been thinking about separating once she finds someone better. Like it's just a phase before she upgrades. I'm sorry, but I couldn't stay quiet anymore. It was how unsurprising they were. Because deep down, I'd known it was more than emotional neglect. There was always something simmering beneath her smirks and dismissiveness, an undercurrent of contempt she no longer cared to hide. But this confirmed it. She was biding her time, keeping me around until a better option came along. Living rent-free in the comfort I provided while shopping for replacements behind my back. That night, I sat in my car outside the apartment for nearly an hour, letting the gravity of everything settle. I wasn't devastated. I was just clear. For the first time in a long while, I felt direction return to my spine. She wasn't going to leave on her own. She wanted the convenience of me until she no longer needed it. She thought she could drag it out, play pretend, whisper insults to friends, and keep me unaware. But I wasn't going to wait for her to hand me my eviction notice from my own life. The very next day, I took the final steps. I met with my bank to separate our accounts. I redirected my salary into a new private checking account and canceled the joint credit card I had foolishly kept active. I updated my emergency contacts and rerouted my mail to the small apartment I'd been quietly leasing on the other side of town. I also drafted a simple lease transfer document, prepared to remove myself from our current apartment contract while assigning full financial responsibility to her. Legally clean. No room for misinterpretation. I was nearly done. All I needed was the right moment. That Friday night, I returned home earlier than usual. She wasn't expecting me. The lights were low, music playing from the speaker in the living room. I set my keys down quietly and moved through the hall like a shadow. Her voice echoed from the bedroom, giggling. I paused. She wasn't alone. A man's voice answered, low and smug. I didn't storm through the door or start shouting. Instead, I walked back out to the kitchen, sat at the counter, and waited. 10 minutes later, I heard the front door open. He left laughing. She didn't walk him out. Just shouted, text me when you get home. I let the silence stretch. Waited for her to realize I was there. Eventually, she wandered into the kitchen, froze when she saw me. Oh, you're home early. I am. She didn't say anything else. Just looked mildly inconvenienced, like I had interrupted a nap. That's when I stood up, handed her the lease transfer papers. What's this? She asked, brows knitting. Roommate responsibilities, I said flatly. You want to live alone? You will. Everything in your name now. Rent, utilities, everything you used to take for granted. I've moved out. Effective immediately. She blinked at the pages, then at me. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I saw something real flash through her expression. She wasn't laughing anymore. And she hadn't even seen the final twist yet. The moment she realized I was serious, something in her shifted. She stared at the lease transfer papers like they were in a different language, slowly reading, rereading, trying to catch some detail that might say this wasn't real, that it was a joke, something temporary. It wasn't. When she finally looked up at me, her voice came out quiet, breathless. Wait, you're moving out. No, I said. I've already moved out. I didn't offer anything else. She wasn't my partner. I had stopped playing that role the minute she redefined us in front of her friends. I simply stood there, hands in my pockets, watching her try to process what she had so casually triggered. She laughed, but it was brittle, the kind of laugh that's supposed to cover up disbelief. Come on, you're not serious. This is just because of that dumb joke, isn't it? I tilted my head slightly. Was it a joke? She opened her mouth. Her face was a slow-motion collapse, confusion, irritation, then something close to fear. She glanced at the papers again. But you didn't say anything. You didn't tell me you were unhappy. I did, I replied. Every time I picked up after you. Every time I asked how your day was and you looked through me. I said a lot, actually. You just didn't listen. She paced a little, shaking her head, clearly trying to gain ground. This is ridiculous. You're blowing things out of proportion. People joke. I didn't mean it like that. I let her rant. I gave her space to claw at the edges of this moment, looking for an exit, a reversal. But she was too late. I had been gone long before my body left that apartment. She reached for a different angle. So that's it? You're just leaving? You're not even going to try? That one almost made me laugh. Because of how familiar it sounded. I'd asked her that question in 100 different ways over the last 2 years. Every time she dismissed my concerns, changed the subject, or turned it into a joke, I've been asking her, are you even trying? And now she wanted effort. Too little. Far too late. I'm not just leaving, I said. I'm stepping aside. So you can enjoy the space you already claimed. She tried a softer tone then. Walked up to me, touched my arm lightly, like proximity could undo the distance. Come on. Don't do this. We've built a life. That has to mean something. I didn't move. It did mean something, I said. Until you decided it didn't. I picked up the copy of the signed lease and left the rest on the counter. I've notified the landlord, I said as I stepped toward the door. They'll follow up with you on the next billing cycle. She followed me. Where are you even staying? Somewhere peaceful. She just stood there, stunned. And I walked out without looking back. By the time I reached my car, my hands were shaking not from sadness, but from the sheer weight of release. It was like walking out of a dense fog and finally seeing the landscape again. I wasn't even hurt. I was clear. And for the first time in a long while, I was in motion. Over the next few days, she called, texted, left voicemails filled with fragmented logic, trying to find the version of me who would respond, the one who always came back with a solution or apology. I ignored them. On the 5th day, I got an email from our landlord confirming she had accepted full financial responsibility for the unit and utilities, with a minor protest about unfairly sudden transition. I had left no room for negotiation. My legal tracks were covered. She could protest all she wanted. On paper, she'd agreed. A week later, I received a call from our internet provider. Sir, we're calling to confirm cancellation of your account ending in 4392. The new primary contact has declined to take over billing. Then cancel it, I said. When she called again that night, I answered for the first time. Why are you making this harder than it has to be? She said, breath ragged with frustration. I took a long pause. This isn't hard for me at all. A silence followed, thick and heavy. Then she said, you're really doing this. I already did. She tried one more thing, sarcasm, her old fallback. Well, congratulations. You got what you wanted. Hope being single again feels amazing. It does, I said. But that's not what I wanted. I wanted a partner. You offered me a role as a placeholder. She didn't have a reply. So I ended the call. That night, I slept better than I had in years. But there was one more layer I hadn't anticipated. Jenna, the friend who had messaged me before, reached out again. She asked if I had time for coffee. I hesitated, but agreed. We met at a quiet cafe downtown. She looked nervous, but determined. I didn't just message you because I was tired of hearing her talk trash, she said. There's more you should know. I raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. She wasn't planning to separate. She was planning to force you out slowly, get the lease in her name, move in someone else. She said it'd be easier to play it like you just couldn't handle things anymore. It took a moment to process. So she wanted to replace me without confrontation. She didn't want a divorce. She wanted you to give up so she could look like the victim. I felt the chill crawl up my spine. She told Laura she already found someone. He just wasn't ready to move in yet. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I thought you should know how deep it went. And because you were always kind to her. She didn't deserve that. Jenna paused, hesitated again. And maybe I hated watching her waste something I would have valued. Her words hung in the air. I nodded once, quietly. This wasn't just about jokes anymore. It was about betrayal, premeditated, and performed behind a polished mask. But she hadn't expected me to flip the script. She was about to find out what life really looked like. When the roommate she mocked stopped paying the rent, financially and emotionally. 3 weeks after I left, I received a letter addressed in her handwriting, neat, measured, with the slightly exaggerated loop she used when trying to appear more thoughtful than she really felt. There was no return address. Just my name, written carefully as though that alone might soften everything that came after. Inside were 2 pages. The first was a delayed apology. I realized now that I made light of things that mattered deeply to you. I never should have said what I did in front of others. It wasn't fair to reduce you to a joke. No acknowledgement of the lies, the manipulation, the planning behind my back. Just a concession that the joke went too far, like that was the sole infraction. The second page was more personal. She wrote about our trip to Maine that one summer. The way I used to surprise her with playlists before long drives. The sound of my laugh when we watched bad movies. She tried to summon warmth, as if recalling the right memory might reset what was broken. I read the letter once, set it down, and never picked it back up. She didn't understand. This wasn't about a single night at a restaurant. It was about disrespect so deeply woven into our marriage that she'd stopped recognizing it as such. She had looked at me for years and seen only what I could offer: stability, income, presence, never who I was, never what I felt. And worse, she had turned that one-sided view into theater, performed it for others, mocked me to her friends, depersonalized our life together until I was nothing more than background. So, no, I didn't write back. Instead, I settled further into my new rhythm. The apartment I'd leased was smaller, quieter. There was less furniture, less noise, less clutter. But every corner belonged to me. Every decision was mine alone. I kept the blinds open more. Let the sun in. Cooked dinner when I felt like it. Some nights I just ordered in and watched documentaries with no one to tell me I was boring. Freedom didn't arrive like a thunderclap. It came in fragments, the absence of tension when I woke up, the stillness of rooms not filled with emotional static, the quiet realization that I wasn't bracing myself anymore for coldness or neglect. But freedom isn't the same as closure. That came in an entirely different form. Jenna messaged me again. This time, she wasn't apologizing or warning me. She just asked if I was open to meeting for lunch. I was hesitant. Part of me still associated her with that dinner. That night, everything changed. But the other part, the part that had seen her risk a friendship to tell me the truth, trusted her. We met at a little place downtown. She was already seated when I arrived, sipping iced tea, her expression unreadable but calm. When I sat down, she smiled, not out of politeness, but gently, like she'd been waiting to exhale. "I hope this isn't weird," she said. "I just wanted to see how you were doing." I told her the truth. I was better. Lighter. It surprised even me to say it. She nodded. "You seem clear." I asked her how things were between her and my ex. She shook her head slowly. "We haven't spoken much since she found out I talked to you." She said I betrayed her. I told her she betrayed herself. There was a silence after that. Not uncomfortable, just reflective. Then she said, "She always thought you'd never leave. That no matter how she treated you, you'd stay. She said once that your loyalty was your weakness." I let those words settle. I remembered the dozens of times I had made excuses for her. How I convinced myself that stress or time or miscommunication explained the coldness. She was wrong, I said finally. Loyalty isn't weakness. It's a gift. But it has to be earned. Jenna smiled. "I'm glad you see that now." We didn't talk about anything heavy after that. The conversation drifted to music, books, a documentary I'd recently watched. She laughed easily, without effort, and for the first time in years, I felt what it was like to have a conversation where I didn't feel invisible. When lunch ended, she touched my hand lightly as we stood. "If you ever want to talk again," she said, "I'm around. No pressure." And then she left. I stood there on the sidewalk for a while, watching people pass, feeling the late afternoon sun warm my face. I wasn't sure what that moment was, the beginning of something new or just the closing scene of something old. But I felt content. A few days later, I checked in on the utilities one last time, out of habit more than anything. She was behind on the internet bill, and the electricity had a warning notice pending. I didn't intervene. It wasn't mine to fix anymore. She wanted to live without a partner. She wanted autonomy, space, independence. Now she had all of it. The apartment, the rent, the broken lamp she said she'd get around to fixing. The cold dinners, the quiet nights, the empty rooms. Everything she claimed to want, right there, in full measure. The irony was, she finally did have a roommate. I was no longer in the punchline. I was the man who heard it, walked away, and never looked back.
Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.